Welcome to the Politics of Everything. I'm Amber Daines, your host and podcast producer. This is a half hour of power, a podcast dropping every week where I unpack the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment, quality, and much, much more. Our guests are seasoned in the field or topic of their choice, even if you've not heard of them yet. This is a non-partisan show. So while I love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate of ideas, this is not a purely blue, white, green program. Please subscribe, tune in and enjoy the politics of everything. Before we start this episode, it talks about a topic that may be upsetting and affect some listeners, so please bear that in mind before you tune in. Kristi McVee is a passionate advocate for child safety and the prevention of child sexual abuse, dedicating over a decade of her life to this critical cause through her career as a police officer, detective, and specialist child interviewer. As the author of Operation KidSafe, a detective's guide to child abuse prevention, Kristi has empowered countless parents and caregivers with the knowledge and practical strategies needed to protect children from sexual abuse and harm. With a deep commitment to safeguarding the wellbeing of children, Kristi has emerged as a recognised authority in the field of child protection. Her journey began with a personal mission to create a safer world for kids and has evolved into a significant influence on the lives of families and communities. She is a sought-after keynote speaker, captivating audiences at child safety events and parenting conferences with her expertise and engaging delivery. And I warmly welcome you to the Politics of Everything.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful.
Podcasting remotely can be challenging, but it doesn't have to be. Since day one of the Politics of Everything, I have relied on Zencastr's all-in-one solution to make the process quick and painless, the way it should be for those of us who just love great content and want to get our ideas out into the world. If you know me, I'm obsessed with quality in terms of my guests, my sound, and everything about my show has to be great the first time. I'm time poor. It's so easy to use Zencastr. I'm not tech savvy and you don't need to be either. There's nothing to download. Just click on the link and off we go. Zencastr is all about making your podcasting experience easy, and with everything from local recording to automatic post-productions now in their toolkit, you don't have to leave your browser to get that episode done, and done fast. I have a special offer for you, and hopefully you can experience what I have with Zencastr. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my VIP code, the Politics of Everything, all lowercase and one word, to get 30% off your first 3 months of Zencastr Professional. How good is that? I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. Okay. Yeah, well, it's a big topic, and that's why we have that warning at the beginning, but I think it's an important one, and on this program we don't shy away from that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, did you always want to be a police officer as a kid, or did you have a different dream?
No, I didn't. It wasn't even on my radar until I was a parent. So,
oh, how interesting. So early on, what did you think you might do? Like when you're at school, you go to the careers advisor and they go, you'd be good at this, or, have those dreams that you think you might pursue.
I had a really interesting childhood. So I had horses. So at one stage I thought I'd be a veterinarian. I had like aspirations of, maybe going into that sort of field, but then just realized that I didn't like school that much. So I didn't actually finish school. So funny enough. And then I went into administration, and and here I am.
It's amazing. I love joining the dots, and I think that's good for people just to get a sense of where you've come to up to this point as well. Yeah. So getting to the topic today, what do you think, and there's probably loads of them, but what do you think is the biggest myth around child safety and abuse in your experience, and why is that still something that's so prevalent in terms of the myth itself?
The biggest myth is that it doesn't happen to your child or your family, and that it's a stranger that will abuse your child, when it's actually 90% of all child sexual abuse is by someone known to the child, either through family, which is about 50%, or someone, a close relative, neighbour, friend, teacher, etc.
And that's interesting because as you're saying that, and I am a parent of two boys who are age 11 and 15, and I grew up in the 80s with stranger danger and all that sort of stuff as being kind of, we need to know where you are, but if you're with someone we know, that's fine. But I feel like I know that the chances are higher that it's likely to be someone in our immediate circle or someone who's befriended the kids or a person of authority like a sporting coach or a teacher that might in fact potentially groom them per se. So it's interesting that myth has pervaded because I feel like I think of it differently these days to that stranger danger myth.
Yeah, it's generally like what we do here is, or what people always used to say to me when I was a detective is that, oh, I just didn't think it would happen to my child.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's probably the worst thing you could possibly imagine, other than obviously the death of your child. Like this is pretty much, every parent's nightmare.
yes, very much so. And well, it just starts. It's a huge trauma to the family, and it is a huge thing to have to navigate through and hopefully help heal. I've spoken to lots of survivors over the years, and it like leaves a lasting toll, and it leaves a lasting impression on their lives. So it can change the whole trajectory of a person or a child's life. So yeah, I just wish that more parents took this seriously and more people took this topic seriously. I think because it is such a really scary and really distasteful topic, people don't want to hear about this stuff sitting around a breakfast table or, at a dinner table. But if we gave survivors and victim survivors more of a chance to share their stories, we would probably have a lot more uh, patience, compassion, time for this subject.
Absolutely. And look, the stats are pretty full on. I mean, I'm obviously prepared for today, and I just wanted to know, whether things had moved in any way. But statistics show that 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys, and almost 30% of all Australian adults have been a victim of child sexual abuse. And as you mentioned, 90% are abused by someone known to them, and almost 50% by direct familial relatives, such as a parent, a caregiver, sibling, or relative. And of course, there's also the other taboo of, abuse by another child to another child or another minor. These statistics are very alarming. It must seem like it's like happening everywhere, but maybe people are not sort of shining as much a light on it because it is distasteful. What do you say to that?
If we don't look at right in the face of it, and if we don't talk about it, and that's part of why I do what I do now after leaving the police, we have to have these conversations. And those statistics are fresh. They're from 2023, and it's the Australian Child Maltreatment Study was the one who shined a light on those current statistics. But even up until 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it was 1 in 3 and 1 in 7 boys. But it's now come down to 1 in 5. And we now have so much more data, which is great, but it's not obviously preventing child sexual abuse, knowing this. So
Exactly. Knowing's one thing. The prevention is
another.
probably the missing piece. And it
Yeah.
does seem like, we're now in 2024. Child abuse was something I must admit was really talked about when I was growing up. And, even in mainstream media, it sort of reminds me a little bit of like how, and you were obviously in the police force, domestic violence. We used to, the colloquialism was, oh, it's just a domestic, when a wife or someone else was being abused in their own home. Are these numbers on child sexual abuse perhaps higher than those shocking figures because it's, is it more reported now, or is it not going away? Like, what can we sort of take from this so that we understand where we are in 2024?
I often think about this stuff because when I first started in the police, and obviously didn't have a clue growing up, not talking about it like yourself, I used to think, is it getting worse or is it being more reported? I think it's always been bad, but we're now talking about it. And there is a few things that are contributing to the worsening of this, is that we now have easier accessible pornography, and that is actually contributing to the harm and abuse of children, both by peers and by adults. So we once upon a time, and without going too much detail about, the offender behaviors, an offender would have to get through a lot of they'd have to get through a lot of resistance. So for instance, we know that it's wrong to abuse children. So therefore, you have to get past that resistance to go then and harm a child. But now with online child exploitation material that's easily accessible on the internet, that restriction or that
it's almost it's sort of, I don't know if taboo is probably not quite the right word, but it feels like
it's been normalized.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. And it's been mainstreamed, I suppose, is another way to think about it.
Yeah. And one of the recent studies showed that 1 in 6 Australian men would sexually abuse a child if no one ever found out, and child or young person. So not necessarily talking about children under the age of, under pubescent, but child or young person. If no one was to find out, 1 in 6 Australian men would sexually abuse a child. So this is a very recent study that came out, and it's very scary to think that that is the opinion of people, adults.
And they're willing to share that in a survey, even if it's anonymous. The idea that's even in their brains at that level is quite disturbing. In the work you do, obviously a lot of it is around education, around, for the parents and the carers in young people's lives. It's a very difficult topic. Where do you start with it? Because I think there's that fine line, and I'm thinking of, anything that's kind of, like you say, distasteful or grim. Like, you don't just want to do shocking, extreme stories, because I think sometimes people go, well, that would never happen to us. We're not in a cult. We don't do this. We're not like that. Our family's not like that. There's a lot of kind of otherness that comes into this that happens to others. So how do you educate parents without just doing the shock stuff and then having them perhaps feel like that was terrible, but that won't happen to us still?
Yeah, so I talk about safe and unsafe behaviours by adults, and I talk about appropriate and inappropriate behaviours. So in order for us to identify what is safe and unsafe, we need to think about what we believe is a safe adult and how they behave. For instance, a safe adult would never ask a child to obviously touch them or to see their private parts. A safe adult doesn't talk behind closed doors with a child in a room on their own. A safe adult, and I'm talking about any safe adult, I'm not talking about, say, teacher-child relationship. And a safe adult believes children. A safe adult is someone who is going to, if a child says no, they're going to respect that no and respect that boundary and not push past it. So, there's certain, language that I like to use to explain what's a safe adult and what's an unsafe adult, and what's an inappropriate behavior and what's an appropriate behavior. For instance, I don't believe that it's appropriate for adults to be friends with kids on social media. So, when I talk to young people, I'm like, do you think it's appropriate for adults to be your friends on social media, and why? And then we go into that. So I think if we just call out or just start thinking about safety and what is safe and unsafe when it comes to adults and child protection, and then what is appropriate and inappropriate behaviours, then we can sort of tackle it a little bit softer.
Yes. And I think that kind of makes sense. And then in that process, I mean, do you find it takes more than one kind of engagement with parents and carers? Like, how do you keep the message going? Because I think sometimes these things kind of feel like, okay, I paid attention to that, but in the day-to-day, to sort of low on their radar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so part of child safety or child abuse prevention is a skill set that we teach kids from really early on called protective behaviours and body safety. So in that skill set, we talk about everyone has the right to feel safe at all times, and you can talk with someone about anything. So first of all, we need to identify, well, when I feel safe, how do I feel in my body? And when I feel unsafe, how do I feel in my body? And us as adults will talk about that as our intuition, that gut feeling that we feel.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think as a parent, that does kick in sometimes, or as a human really, like it just, as you get older, you have that gut sense when something's not quite right, or you feel uneasy in the company of something, of someone.
And we teach that to kids so that they can identify it and then they can tell someone when they don't feel safe. So, and we also teach kids who are on their safety team, and a child should always choose their own safety team, because unfortunately, if we're picking their safety team for them and saying, oh, well, dad, nana, and uncle are all part of your safety team, we don't know, if that child feels safe with that person or if something's happening. So it's better if a child chooses a safety team, and then they know that they've got these people, and when they feel unsafe, they can go to them. And that's how we teach children. But think about it, if we're an adult and we're not feeling safe, or we have those warning signs go off, because that's what they are. They're early warning signs that something isn't right and you don't feel great about it, and we listen to that intuition, then we would have a greater possibility of protecting children.
Absolutely. Obviously, online grooming, and you mentioned pornography on our kids' devices is everywhere. And I know. I mean, as a mother of boys, I mean, I remember when both kids were in primary school. I've got one in year 6 and one in year 10 now. Reading that statistic, by year 7, like 90% of boys have all seen pornography, whether you like it or not, because friends have different access levels, and we've got child restrictions on our devices and access, but they go to people's homes, or they're like see with friends on a bus, and they've got no restrictions on their phone, for example.
Yeah.
What role can we play in monitoring that? And I'm thinking this now, and I'm kind of personalizing it, because as kids get older, obviously you don't have the same degree of control over them, and they're not with you as much, and you don't have access to the devices all the time. Even online games, I'm thinking things like Roblox, which my kids never play. People were saying that's like a grooming center. I'm like, what is going on?
Yeah, well, scarily, Roblox has like 50 million users a day, and 50% of those are over the age of 18. So when you're combining 50% of kids under the age of 18 and 50% over the age of 18,
that's not ideal.
It's not ideal. But okay, so with regards to devices, online grooming, etc., we really need to have conversations, and we need to have open dialogue with our young people. I mean, going back to those protective behaviors lessons, if we start having really good conversations around safety, appropriate behaviors from a very young age, and it's not scary when you start it and you're talking about it as in, oh, well, it's my body's my body, and it's no one's allowed to touch my body, no one's allowed to touch your body, no one's allowed to look at our private parts. And then you're moving on to online safety, listening to your warning signs, and you're having those conversations open and honestly from a very young age. And then when they get to that age where they're starting to, have those conversations with strangers, and they've got people that, or young, other peers that might ask them for a nude or something like that, then we've already talked and had really good conversations, which means that our children are much more likely to come to us and talk to us about stuff that's making them feel scared, unsafe, or just doesn't make them feel good. And with regards to online safety, you've done everything right by having child safe, having something on their devices, locking it down. Remember, when we give our child a device, they're borrowing it. We're the owners of that device. They're borrowing that device, so we have ultimate control over it.
And I do remind my kids of that, particularly when they've done something this is off topic, that I'm like, no, you're not listening. We've got to go now, because they are very, distracting, and the dopamine fix is kind of, next level, I think, for that generation.
Yeah, you do. And my daughter's 16, just about to turn 16. So, I've been through it all with her, and it's different to how we grew up. So we've just got to have a different type of conversation. And some of that's just about, what would you do if someone did this? Or how would you, has any of your friends ever been asked for a nude, or had a nude shared? Or has anyone asked for an inappropriate photo, or a photo of your privates, for little kids? Or, has any of your friends, always using friends is a good way to talk, but really open communication, supervision, oversight, checking in on them, asking them what's going on. Your child the best. If there's something going on, they're withdrawing, they're maybe on social media more than they should be because all of a sudden something's happened, they're anxious, depressed, panicking, checking in with your kid and just making sure, because unfortunately in this day and age, we're all very distracted, and we need to ensure that we're not neglecting their emotional needs just because they're behind a device.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. So when it comes to things like open communication, I feel like, as kids get older, that dialogue needs to change because, little kids could be more open to that conversation and sort of, they're sort of in awe of their parents still as our kids get older and they're teenagers. There's a bit of a cringe factor when their parents start talking about things like sex and, asking them, have you been sending nudes or has anyone sent you a nude? How do we actually make sure that we're sort of proactive in that? Because we've got to keep checking in with them without perhaps alienating them, I guess is the question I'm really asking.
Well, I've talked to lots of young people and teenagers. I was a specialist child interviewer for 9 years, and so I talked about this all the time. So the way we ask is really important. It's, again, like I mentioned earlier, asking in relation to their friends is sometimes one of the ways. It's like going through the side door instead of the front door. So saying, have any of your friends ever had experience with XYZ? When it comes to online gaming and being online, sitting on the couch with them and just like asking them to show you, or can you play with that game with them? Because spending 5-10 minutes doing something or 20 minutes doing something that's important to them will help them and will start the conversation around stuff. Whilst you're gaming with them, you could be saying, hey, has anyone ever done this XYZ? Sitting in the car, if it's just you and, if you've got multiple children, obviously try not to have conversations like this with all of them in the car. But, if you've got one child in the car going to a sporting event or whatever, just saying, hey, I saw this on the radio, I saw this on the news, has anything like that happened to one of your friends, or have you ever had that happen to you? Using what the tools around you, social media, TikTok, Instagram, what you see on the news, what you hear on the radio, having conversations like that, using a resource like that really starts to make it not about them per se, but what's happening in their world.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I can see, and I know for my kids, both of them actually, both boys, in the car when there's no eye contact, they'll often tell me everything.
Yeah. So when you're sitting next to them somewhere, even like on the couch, that's a perfect place.
Where it's not confrontational. We're going, we're having a serious chat now. They tend to then go, oh my goodness, am I in trouble? And they close down a little bit, you know what I mean? And
the car's the best place because they can't escape.
That is that too. There is the locked door.
But, the other place that I like to have conversations, serious conversations is when, and, not all teenagers are okay with it, but, laying down in bed just before they're about to go to sleep when, you go in there to say, hey, time to switch off, let's put your phone away, let's put everything away. And you lay down and you just go, like the lights are off, it's dark in their room. It's kind of nice to have that wind down time with your kids.
Absolutely. Changing tack, what is your number one business tool or hack? And it can't be your smartphone, unfortunately, because everyone has one of those. And I guess how's it kind of helping you either in your business or your life? And it could be an app or it could be some other little device which you just, you're loving at the moment.
It's an interesting one. Yeah, smartphones are really helpful, but I would say my favorite app at the moment is Canva.
You are the third person to say that. I might have to ban smartphones and Canva from this soon.
Well, how about my second favourite?
Yeah, go for that. I'll put you on the spot now.
Yeah. My second favourite and one that I'm using a lot of is my Google Calendar, because obviously I don't know, does anyone have an actual paper calendar anymore? Because
no, I think I stopped buying them probably about 4 years ago. You used to buy one every year and have it hanging up or a big chart on your fridge or whatever it is with all the kids' activities and stuff. Yeah. Now we all just send each other meeting invites. That's how that on our phones, just so we know where we need to be when, because we are, like a lot of people, very busy.
Yeah, everyone is, and you can each have a different color. Like if my Google Calendar imploded, I wouldn't know what I'm doing.
You wouldn't know you need to be here to do this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Your biggest life lesson to date and why? What's it taught you?
Well, I haven't really delved into this yet, but I got PTSD from my time in the police. So I was in the police for 10 years. And when you have severe, high stress, high anxiety and everything going on, one of the biggest life lessons I learned is that everything, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. All you have to do is get through today and tomorrow will be okay. Because sometimes when you're going through those really extremely highly charged mental health moments, and you're not sure whether you can survive through it, because unfortunately depression, anxiety, they've been a very big part of my life since leaving the police. But just knowing that tomorrow there is, just waiting for tomorrow, and it will be better tomorrow, and eventually the tomorrows get better, and you come out the other side of it. And that's pretty deep, but I've unfortunately been to a lot of cases where people haven't survived those moments, and so just waiting for the next moment, and you'll be okay. And I think our young people need reminding of that as well, because in the moment our young people think that they're never going to survive what they're going through. So
Yes.
just
perspective is kind of important, I think, in those sorts of situations.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, just reminding everyone that tomorrow will be a better day.
Excellent. I like that. How do you define success these days? You've obviously, running your own stuff now, but in your life, I imagine success has evolved over time. And what makes success kind of resonate for you these days?
Success for me now, it's so different to what it was, but it's definitely things that make me light up, give me joy, make me excited. Before it was, getting to that next career goal, or that next thing, that next house you wanted to buy, or that money you wanted to save. But now it's all about what brings me joy, because that's really all that life's about.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does bring you joy? Do you have any hobbies or things that you just love doing?
Oh, sadly, yes. My dash hound.
Don't say sadly. I think it's great when
my
adults
dash
have
hound.
hobbies.
My dash hound brings me so much joy. He's only about to turn 1 year old. Walking on the beach and swimming in the ocean. It's definitely one of those things that clears your mind, clears your brain, clears anything that's going on. You cannot be sad when you're in the ocean.
Absolutely. And to wrap up our conversation today, which obviously has dealt with a very challenging topic for many, and of course yourself having, worked in this sector for so long, what would be your final takeaway message for anyone listening on the politics of child sexual abuse?
Please go become more aware of what the statistics are, what to look out for. There's red flags and warning signs. Just please it's a really difficult topic, and I understand that, but please be aware that if you've got young children in your family, they need you to take that time and to just learn a little bit more about it. And once you know something like that, you can't unknow it. So it's not going to disappear out of your brain, and it's something that your kids or the kids around you need you to know.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time. And of course, anyone listening can contact you through some details on the show notes. If this episode has raised issues for you and you are in Australia, Lifeline is 131114. Thank you so much for your time. Until next time, please take care. Thanks so much for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, I thrive on your feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network through Apple, Spotify, and all the usual suspects. I'm always on the hunt for new and diverse guests, so if you or someone you know has a fresh idea you're busting to get out there, please email me at amber@amberdanes.com, and my crew will get back to you very soon.